Pouchy! Hi, everybody, it's me, Pouchy, and I'm here to have what you need.
I have an apple, a piece of tape, or a stick of dynamite. That was great.
Pouchy! Oh, Carlin, welcome once more to
Casey.
Cinema Snorkel. How you doing?
Yeah, let's check in with our feelings real quick. I'm feeling excited to be doing this podcast with you. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling excited to do the podcast, nervous that I don't mess it up, and anxious that I don't mess it up. I couldn't think of any other emotions. I'm feeling great. You know what? That particular scene hit home because of how much children's TV we watched with our youngest sister. Shout out to Lola.
She still watches all those
who's,
shows. Just kidding.
So little. She was so
but
widowed.
We were very, because we were 8
sorry,
and...
we say that out loud.
How many years? 13 years older than her? 8
12.
and 12 years older than her.
12.
We were way better versed in kids' TV shows than anyone else our age. And that was a little embarrassing. We were like, yeah, you know, like Dinosaur Train and like, you know, Martha Speaks and, you know, Boz.
Like Boz, the big Barney ripoff. I had to actively suppress the jingles that would jump into my mind. You know, I'd be like, name is Boz. I'd be like, never mind. Like I'm a 14-year-old freshman in high school and I just can't be doing this, you know?
No, you can't let that show. Can't let that freak flag fly.
Lola'd be sitting watching a show and we'd be like, quote unquote, doing math, you know, but actually just like glued in, like absolutely 100% tuned in to whatever kids show she's watching.
Well,
anyway.
She watched a lot more TV than we did. And I still... As a kid, we weren't allowed to watch too much TV. We didn't have cable TV, and we were pretty limited about the amount of time, which I am so thankful for that. But now, whenever I see a television screen glowing, my eyes just like drift towards it, and I can't stop watching. It can be the dumbest infomercial or like some really boring news, like daytime weather, and I'm like, what are they saying?
TV.
What's that mop do? Is that mop going to clean up that spill? It always does.
But you know what? I can confidently say, given the fact that I have an iPhone, it's not like limited exposure that made me glued to screens. You know what I mean? I think that's just a personality thing. I'm sorry, Carlin. We got to own it. That's a personality
thing.
Want.
I'm going to blame it on our parents.
Deny it. Launch it in the emotion launcher and launch it to the back of your mind.
It should be nothing but smooth sailing from...
Hello? I'm anxiety. Where can I put my stuff?
A new emotion.
Oh, I'm sorry. We wanted to make such a good first impression.
What do you mean, we?
I'm envy.
Look at your hair. Oh, yeah, not happening.
That's on we.
On what?
It's what you would call the boredom.
What's your name, big fella?
That's embarrassment.
You got a real sweaty palm there, buddy.
Riley's life requires more sophisticated emotions than all of you.
You can't just bottle us up.
We are suppressed emotions!
Let Operation New Riley begin.
What is that? It's the sarcasm!
Sarcasm?
Boy, are we so lucky we ran into you guys!
Boy, are we so lucky we ran into you guys!
Wow, those guys are jerks.
Oh, Casey, there is so much to like about this movie. Let's just go back and forth and say what we liked.
Okay, let's do it. Inside Out 2, what did you like?
I really liked, there's a bunch of very clever one-liners. The first one I jotted down was when Anxiety goes, Joy, a good plan always has many parts. She's like, there's multiple parts to my plan. And I'm like, that's exactly what Anxiety would say. A good plan always has many parts.
Yes.
I'm like, that's what makes it a good plan.
I liked when the teenage girls are analyzing each other's like micro looks, like the eyebrow raised, look right there. Like they are like zooming in on the eye. It's like, it raised, you know, and then they're like, but they're each doing that to each other. Yeah.
Yes.
That was
in
hilarious.
general, Disgust got to shine way more in this movie, and she was awesome. She was a great character.
I loved Disgust's jammies, for example, where she had like the sleep cap and the They just nailed it. I like that kind of stuff makes these movies just so much fun to watch.
I loved we're suppressed emotions. We got bottled up, like all the puns. And I loved Riley's secrets, like what we were talking about earlier. Riley's secrets are hilarious. She still secretly likes the guy, the video game character that has the most ridiculously stupid power you've ever seen. I can totally resonate with that.
Who was your video game crush,
My
Carl?
video game crush? Oh, Spyro.
I knew you were going to say that.
Of course, but dragons. I don't know if you could call it a crush, but I really love Spyro.
Dragons. I liked when they're down in the Imagination Center. So they're trying to rescue Riley, and the joy and anger and fear are like all kicked out down. I don't know if sadness is still with them. And they go to the imagination room where they're like busy at work. And they're like, quick, send up happy things, like send up things that will inspire and bring joy. And the one goatee illustrator like draws a cat, and she's like, a cat. Like, I don't know how that fits in, but I love it. And he like sits back in his chair and he's like nodding. I'm like, I don't know who at Pixar they were calling out with that, but that was so funny.
The brain cells are hilarious. Is that what they are? That are just kind of they're workers. They're little worker guys.
I don't know. They're just like little guys, like the guys.
They had a throwback to the first movie where you see his hat laying on the ground and it says "my hat," and there's this ridiculous scene where the two brain cells are like, "Dude, that's my hat," and he's like, "No, it's my hat. I wrote my hat in the label, so I know it was my hat." And he's like, "That's what I wrote in my hat."
Yeah. In preparation for this, I did watch Inside Out 1 again, and that movie just shines. I mean, we're going to look back and be like, Pixar had like a string of unbelievable hits, and we got to live in that era.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And Inside Out's totally in the sweet spot.
Do you feel like Inside Out 2 is a worthy sequel?
Carlin, I don't want to. I've done this before. See our last episode on Furiosa. I don't want to just charge in with the negative, because I loved this movie. I loved it, but I got to be honest. When you watch Inside Out 1, they're just in a different weight class. Inside Out 1 is tight. It's succinct. The metaphors make perfect sense. What they're doing at any given moment makes perfect sense. The message that they leave you with makes perfect sense. Yeah. It's crystal clear. I think Inside Out 2 gets a little lost in the sauce. I think it's not as directed or focused like that. Like, I was even finding it more challenging to ask, like, what are the filmmakers trying to say?
Sure.
And not always, because sometimes the best movies, they're thoughtful and thought-provoking. With this one, I felt like, there's a few little threads that happened that maybe they got a little distracted, or maybe they're trying to take too big of a bite out of what their subject matter is, like all of human cognition and how we process emotions and what's your personality.
It's hard to distill it to a cartoon.
Yeah, but that's my take. What's your take?
For the first time I saw it, I did feel like, it's not quite as crisp as the first one. But the second time I saw it, I had much more appreciation for what they were trying to do. And I think what I love about this movie is, as someone who's gone through adolescence, as a girl, it was so accurate. Like, so much of what they captured, I'm like, yes, that is so what it's like to be a girl going through adolescence. And in a sense, funny. They poke fun at it in appropriate ways, but they also kind of dignify it. Like, Riley is... we love Riley and we want to see her succeed, and like the things that bother her bother us, and like she's kind of silly and she's growing and whatever, but overall I feel like this movie is like a tribute to young girls everywhere, and kind of dignifying a class of person who is usually we kind of roll our eyes at little girls. We're like, yeah, right. Like, they can be a little silly and loud and brash and whatever, but I feel like this really captured the whole of it, you know? Yes. We don't roll our eyes at cute little princess girl who's like Riley in the first one. She's so young. She hasn't kind of dipped into adolescence yet. She's still just like sweet and little, and nobody rolls their eyes at that. Yes. But we do kind of roll our eyes when a girl starts to get a little older, and starts making like sillier decisions. But this movie like kind of dignified that in a way, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, to me it's like they show us why she's making those decisions.
Yeah.
And that's what dignifies it. You understand, like when they're in the locker room and she's giggling with her friends and she gets like reprimanded once and everyone's looking at them. And then she doubles down and keeps giggling. I just, obviously, like, yeah, that's a stereotype with like adolescent girls. But you see like why she's doing it, because in her mind, she's facing this huge inner difficulty of, do I connect with my friends? Do I be myself? She kind of in that moment tries being herself, which is Joy at the helm, right? And gets burned so bad from that and other moments that's when anxiety starts to really step in, right? Like, so they kind of show us the why.
Totally.
Right?
And that's a good thing. Like, letting Joy always be the driver isn't actually what's best for Riley. She's encountering more complicated obstacles, and she does need more complicated emotions. But this is the story of like, how do those emotions settle in and feel functional again? It's like very uncomfortable. Growing is uncomfortable, and it doesn't fit all right. And then by the end of the movie, we found our catharsis and our we found the balance again. The equilibrium is restored a little bit better. And then I'm sure there's like 100 more episodes of Inside Out that could keep happening as more and more complicated things hit Riley, and her brain continues to expand and handle the challenges of life.
Yeah. On the whole, do you find the new emotions they introduced, do you find those accurate?
For adolescents, totally.
Boredom, envy, anxiety, and embarrassment.
They don't exist before adolescence.
Yeah,
and that
right.
totally rings true to me. I'm like, yeah, of course you're a kid. You have fear. The end of the first movie is Joy learns that emotions can be more than one thing. You can have sadness and joy in the same memory, and they complement each other. And you can have fear and disgust. Like the emotions start to become more or the memories start to become more complex as her emotions start to become more complex. And Joy does learn her lesson a little bit in the first one. She learns that there's room for all kinds of emotions. And in the second one, you get these ones that at first feel really like awful. You're like, oh no, these are terrible. We don't like them. But then they do have some merits. Like there's some times when even ennui, like that very last scene where mom and dad are
boredom.
like, how was camp? Are you gonna tell us about camp? And she's like, they're freaking out. All the emotions are freaking out. Like, what do we tell mom and dad? And ennui's like, let me take this one. It's fine.
I've been waiting my whole life for this.
Sarcasm.
And then she's just like, it was good.
It's funny.
Yeah, I mean, there's an appropriate role for that. I know our mom would hate this if she were listening, and she probably will. But kids that you hit an age where you're like, I do want to share with my parents, and you should share with your parents. But also, there's an appropriate sense of self where you're like, I don't have to share like each and every little thing.
Yeah,
that's a healthy developmental stage.
Because growing up is going from a totally dependent little baby to becoming a fully fledged, independent adult. And so the stages of separation are ever increasing. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Kids are, from the moment they're born, they're increasingly separating themselves from their parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry to tell you, because you got a little baby.
No, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it right now. Carlin, let's get into some of the themes, because you already alluded to this, but I think there's so much to unpack here with the themes. So in the first one, you said it's about emotions can be more than one thing. And I, even going back to Inside Out 1, when Sadness sits down with Bing Bong, the imaginary friend, who's your friend who likes to play and make you weep. When I think of Bing Bong, I feel sad. And when Bing Bong's rocket gets thrown away, Joy at first is trying to be like, hey, look at this, and it's just like, it's just not working. And Sadness comes up and puts her hand on his shoulder and is just like, I'm really sorry about your rocket. That was something that you loved, and it's gone now. And he's like, it was so good. And they like, did I cry on the rewatch? Yes. And also, did I cry on the first watching with Lola? Shout out to you, Lola, who was just a little teeny bopper. She was a kid, and I don't know how old she was, like probably 10 or 11. And we watched that scene with Bing Bong, and Bing Bong gets left behind in the Veil of Oblivion, crosses the river Styx, and they're like, who's your friend who likes to play Bing Bong? And I was like, okay. And I looked over at Lola, and she's like, what? I was
Typical
like,
Lola.
You have ice in your veins.
She
You don't
knew.
understand.
She cares. I know it.
Well, she was still totally a kid. She just hadn't said goodbye to any of those She didn't know yet. She hadn't said goodbye to any of those childish things and learned to mourn them. Whatever. The point of Inside Out 1 is so well done, which is that you need to let sadness have its turn. And if you don't, you're completely unequipped for the hard parts of life. So, on that note, what is Inside Out 2 saying?
Yeah.
What are the filmmakers trying to say? What's the story that we go on with these new emotions?
So Joy, at the beginning, it's like, I've learned my lesson. I know that there's a place for every new emotion. And she's like, even if they're really difficult at first. And she kind of rubs Sadness's head and is like, even this turkey. But she's like, that's okay. We can find room for these guys. To me, there's a little bit of a Joy story arc, because she still has, so even though she's learned that lesson, she still thinks that the best thing for Riley is to just disappear all the bad memories. Remember, it opens with her new system where she just flings away. They sweep through the bad memories of the day and they fling them away. They're like, we don't need those anymore. They don't need to be part of our new sense of self. Like, we're going to build a sense of self that is just positive. It's a very joy-centric sense of self. So in one sense, she's learned her lesson.
Yeah,
but
right.
kind of she hasn't really, because she's still throwing things out. She's still trying to over-control and overreach. But then the second story arc we get is anxiety showing up. And what do you think about anxiety's story arc?
Yeah, anxiety, they hit the puberty button, they leave it halfway finished, hilarious. It's just like a constant construction site. Accurate. And then anxiety shows up because Riley needs new emotions to meet the challenges of going to camp, and blunders, like we said a few times. And so then anxiety ends up just taking over and taking control. And so then anxiety's on that same control bent, right? And the whole story is basically anxiety ruining things with a good intention, but ending up ruining everything. Like, we're not going to be ourselves. And so there's all these cringe/tragic moments, like cringe, like when they're like, what's your favorite band? And her favorite band is
Glow or something. Get Up and Glow.
And she says it at first and actually gets a positive response from these girls because she's just being authentic. They're like, I was totally a glowy. Oh, man. And anxiety's like, oh, my gosh, they're belittling us. Like, this isn't going well. This isn't going well. And so then introduces this like fake sense of self to try to fit in at all times.
The thing is, she's on the cusp of being too old. They're like, oh, yeah, I loved Get Up and Glow in middle school. And now Riley, all of a sudden, she's kind of still in middle school. This is her last summer in middle school. But she has to plan for the future now.
Yeah.
You know, these future contingencies about what if I don't have friends. And so she's desperate to fit in. So she's quickly shoves aside anything that reminds her or makes her look like she's too young to be with these girls.
Yeah, right. But obviously it's haphazard, and it leads to anxiety spinning around in her head at all times, leads her to make horrible decisions. The fear of not fitting in, of not making the team, of her life going poorly. She looks in the notebook. She does all this stuff. She betrays her friends. So that's the character arc. And obviously it resolves with things getting so out of hand that she's having almost like a mini panic attack.
Yeah, I think it's fully a panic attack.
Yeah, and she just like doesn't know what to do anymore. She's just like overwhelmed by anxiety. She's followed that train as far as it'll take her.
Yeah.
And then how does it resolve? Because by that time, Joy's back in HQ.
Yep.
And And what happens?
It's brilliant. It's really very clever. So the whole MacGuffin that the primary emotions are going is to retrieve the sense of self that Joy built. So this new invention, there's this sense of self that's based on only the good memories that Joy has like forcibly fabricated. And it's working for what it is, but it gets flung out, and then they're like, Riley will never be herself unless we can get that sense of self and bring it back. In the meantime, Anxiety is building she's reinventing herself, which is hilarious because that's exactly what we've all done in middle school. It's like, I got to reinvent myself.
What you do.
But the unfortunate thing is the only emotions that are now operating in Riley's head at that time are anxiety, embarrassment, and envy. And so all the memories that are getting put into her lake where the strands of personality, what do we call those?
Beliefs.
The beliefs.
Yeah.
Based on her experiences, right? So this feels like, I'm not a psychologist, but this feels like probably they consulted some serious psychologists that really understand how a sense of self is formed.
Yeah, I buy that. I don't know either, but I buy
everything I've heard about the first one. Like when I've heard psychologists talk about the first one, they're like, yeah, this is like pretty accurate actually to how we approach like the inner workings of a mind. So the new sense of self, Anxiety plucks the threads, and they say things like, if I'm a firehawk, I won't be alone.
Yeah.
They used to say things like the blue strands say, I'm a good person. I'm kind. All the good things, like a time when Riley helped her friends or whatever. But the Anxiety memories are saying things like, if I'm a firehawk, I won't be alone. Or they're all driven towards this new identity. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the main difference? Maybe it's a silly question. What's the main difference between the orange and the blue strands? Because they're both based on Riley's experience.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking that the blue ones are based off of things she's seen and observed, whereas the nature of Anxieties, it's based off of a what if.
Yeah.
It's not actually based on observed reality. It's based off of planning ahead and a what if. I think that's just specific to Anxiety because maybe the other ones like embarrassment or boredom or even envy, they are based on like concrete things. Wow, I'm really embarrassed. I forgot that girl's name. You know, but Anxiety, the nature of Anxiety is it's thinking about what could happen. And so it's kind of crackly and brittle. And it's designed to be like, alert.
The static kind of thing.
And so what happens is then Anxiety pilots Riley into this state. And help me remember exactly the sequence of events that happens once Anxiety has Riley in this whirlwind and she's sitting on the bench realizing, I betrayed my friends, this has gone horribly. But she's not even really realizing that yet. She's caught in the whirlwind of what if, oh no. And she hasn't let the reality of the situation hit her yet.
Okay, here's how it happens. Anxiety goes, this is the last piece to make, this is the finishing touch. She puts the last memory and the new sense of self is complete. And what it says, when all the strands come together, it surges forward and the thing it says, I'm not good enough. So based on all these contingencies and these future extrapolations about what we've got to account for every possible bad scenario, you know, they're using Riley's imagination against her to create every bad scenario. And Anxiety's like, that's okay. We're going to have a contingency. We're going to have a plan. We're going to have an idea. You know, we got the big idea to dye our hair and like all this and to look in the notebook and all these bad ideas that are, you know, she's trying to help, I guess, but she ends up just breaking Riley's sense of self. And then the new one says, I'm not good enough. And she's like, oh, shoot. That's okay. I'll just recalibrate the console and we'll just do it anyways. Like, we'll just make it work. And so then you see Riley plays the game mean and hard. And she's slapping around the stick. She's winning. She's scoring. But she's operating without any of the other things that make her who she is. She's not operating with kindness. She's not operating with joy. She's not operating with like the kind of fear and concern and care and even disgust like helps her to reach out to people. And the connection, like her connection with her friends.
Right.
And then there's the moment where she collides with Grace and sends her flying across the ice and then gets sent to the penalty box. So the
Yeah.
consequence of her behavior is that, and there's even a scene where she hogs the puck from one of her own teammates. And the girl's like, come on, dude, we're on the same team. And Riley's so hell-bent on scoring the goal for her own glory and for her own security in the future that she ends up betraying everything that she is. And then when she goes to the penalty box and she's sitting there, and by then Joy is back in there. But anxiety is still in control, but then she starts like, she gets worked up into this panic attack and she's like glitching, and she can't unfreeze. She's frozen in this whirlwind. And Joy realizes we cannot unhook, that we have to unhook this sense of self first. Then she walks up to anxiety. She gets in there and she you see the tear forming in anxiety's eye. It's like she knows she's out of control, but at this point she like can't stop herself. And Joy just says, look, you've got to let her go. And then anxiety very carefully releases Riley. Then they both get kicked out, but the whirlwind is still happening. And that I feel like is meant to represent like when you're having a physical anxiety attack, sometimes your body is reacting with panic. Your body is doing the reaction. You can use your mind to calm yourself down. But it's like this thing has spun out of control. And then they all hug each other. Then Joy removes her own sense of self. And she turns to anxiety and realizes, we've been doing the same thing. We don't get to choose who Riley is. Both Joy and anxiety have been trying to choose who Riley is by editing the bad memories or editing whatever.
Yeah.
And what they both realize is we're not in control, actually.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of where they leave it.
Right. And then what happens is the new beliefs create a new sense of self. And the catharsis is, so Riley lets herself feel, and here's my one gripe, like my one gripe would be, I wish they would have had embarrassment, because he is to anxiety what sadness is to joy. Anxiety's like the what if we do all this stuff. Embarrassment is like, I did do that. I did it.
Yeah.
Oh no, I did do it. And if they would, I think it would have just been a lot clearer if they would have let embarrassment come up to the console and have his turn and he could calm the whirlwind. Because to be honest, everything Riley was afraid that would happen to her has totally happened. And the appropriate emotion, embarrassment, that could let the tears flow and realize this isn't just about me. I've been acting selfishly in self-preservation.
Yeah.
I completely ignored my friends. I hurt my friends. And ultimately, Riley does realize that. They do realize that. But I just think they had the perfect moment there, like almost built. I was like waiting for embarrassment to step up. And he does do some stuff, but it wasn't quite as clear. I don't know. That's just me. That's armchair quarterbacking this scene. But the gist is they stop trying to control Riley and they let even her sense of self take on new dimensions. Like, I'm a good person, but sometimes I da-da-da-da-da-da. Like, it's like a more nuanced version of stuff. It's not this idyllic, I'm amazing. And it's not this like, if I do what it takes for me, I'll get ahead. It like she realizes I'm complicated. And I think you could say that's just the gist of this movie, is realizing we're complicated. You know, Riley's a complicated being and she needs to not try to control those emotions which have been given to her to help navigate life's complexities. And I want to talk about this because I still don't know, Carlin, like what I think about your sense of self changing. Like they have it change and change and change and change, right? Like at the very end, the patterns change depending on the emotions, right? It's not one constant thing. And the point is you need to even let that sense of self change, like yourself can change.
Yeah, but it's all pulling from the same bank.
Right.
I mean, how can they represent? A sense of self is a complicated thing. I think it's just they have to represent it somehow.
That's right. And we could definitely, there's so much room in the story for everything we probably want to say. It's just like, this is where I was like, yeah, it was just a little muddier than the last one. It wasn't less impactful. Like when she finally goes and says sorry to her friend, I was like, yes. She says, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, thank you. Like we've said in the past, like redemption is the best character arc. And she gets redemption because her friends are sweet and they actually show kindness to her and they've still kept loving her the whole time. Yeah. You know, that was a beautiful moment. So, but yeah, it feels like the point is anxiety can't control it. And Joy realizes I was trying to control it too. And no one emotion is big enough to control the whole show and to create a sense of self based on one emotion or one fear, one way of processing like that.
Yeah, there has to be room for the messiness.
And messiness is one way of saying it. And I think that's true, but also just, it's not necessarily messiness because each of those emotions are doing what they're designed to do, actually. And trying to control it is the weird added matrix. Whereas if you understand what each of those emotions are, they're on purpose. Even though at first you're like, what the heck? I don't need this anxiety crap. You know, I don't need this embarrassment. And I like that in this film's definition, anxiety, they say it at the beginning, I help make plans for the future. So a little twinge of not the diagnosis of anxiety, not when it becomes the whirlwind, but a little dab of anxiety is very, very good, or you'd never get your Spanish test studied for.
It's helpful when there's something you can do. It's not helpful when there's, you're extrapolating on these potential outcomes and then freaking out about it.
Yeah. And who in middle school did not dip into that self-protective, what if, reinvent yourself? My conceit was that I was a skater guy, when in reality I was very, very homeschooled.
You're so nerdy. You're a little nerdy guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm nerdy, but I was like, yeah, but I'm kind of emo too. Could I skateboard? No. But I had the shoes that looked like I did,
And you had a little finger skateboard.
So, Carlin, can I ask a silly or significant question? I mean, I know it's not silly. My question would just be, what do the filmmakers mean when they have Joy say, maybe this is what happens when you grow up. You feel less joy. And she says, but I do know this, Riley will never be herself if we don't get this back to headquarters fast. Do you think they're letting that point land? Like, yeah, you do feel a little less joy than you did when you were just a little 10-year-old, so happy in the world. You have to make room for the other more complicated emotions, but it's okay. Or do you feel like that's a depressed kind of statement from Joy that's not actually true? Like she will feel as much joy at some point. What do you think their tone was with that?
I got an answer for you. I totally got an answer for you. And this made me cry. Yeah, I think that line is meant to be like, resonates with us because we all kind of know to some extent it's true. You can't feel the same blissful, innocent, forgetful joy that you do when you're a kid. But there's a scene at the very end, and I'm going to cry just talking about it because it's so beautiful. When Riley finishes her panic attack, she apologizes to her friends, and then she looks up and the sun is like shining through, like filtering through. And then the sparkles come calling Joy to the console.
Oh, yeah.
And Sadness goes, Joy, Riley wants you. And it's like Riley is choosing Joy. This whole time she's kind of been like whiplashed around by her emotions, and the emotions have been controlling her. But this is the first time when Riley, as an adolescent girl, chooses Joy and calls her back to the driver's seat. Oh, so beautiful.
But somehow it doesn't feel like she is controlling in that. It's not like she's like, I'm going to feel joy now. You know what I mean? Like somehow it feels way more natural than that.
No, but you choose it. We have choice, like our emotions don't control us. They influence us greatly. But like what's the analogy that I've said this phrase, I don't remember where I got it. But emotions are like dogs. They're reactive, but you can train them. And, like when we first got Penny and we were learning about how to train a dog for the first time, we learned you shouldn't teach your dog to never, ever bark. You want your dog to bark because if there's an intruder trying to break into your house, your dog needs to be able to alert you to it. There's a function.
Yeah.
But you also don't want your dog to just be barking all the time at the mailman or all the other dogs. So there's a place for emotions to propel us, but there's also a sense in which we harness them because we are persons with willpower.
Yeah. I mean, that's deep. Props to Pixar because this is a film that adults across the country are going to sit around and pontificate on, and counselors are going to think, and like, a group of counselors are having brunch right now and they're talking about this film, and a bunch of overanalytic podcasters are doing the same thing, but also kids would love this movie. They would, and that takes some doing. So I just, props to Pixar for this.
It's really masterful. It's very clever. It's very smart, and it rings true on a lot of levels.
Yeah, it does. The big thing about this movie to me was like, yeah, this really, on the whole, rings true. Carlin, let's talk about our third question. What does a Christian worldview say about the questions of emotions and control and anxiety and joy?
I think this will be fun because Christianity has so much to say about your inner life. And in fact, it might be the primary way we work out our Christianity is in our inner thoughts and in our heart. We're constantly wrestling.
Why do you say that?
Yeah,
why do you say that?
I say that because it's spiritual, and we engage with the spiritual world in our bodies, but also in our hearts and in our minds and in our spirit. And it's interesting because Inside Out, I think, is a great movie, but it's clearly from a worldview without God. And I really want to see, I really want to see what like a theologian's take or like a Christian therapist, what would be their take on what happens to a person, a healthy functioning person with a cornucopia of emotions when Jesus shows up in that person's life. What would be an artistic example of what that would look like?
Maybe we could let the Christian movie studios who are so good at making their B-list takes, let's get PureFlix on this. Maybe we could do a PureFlix and they just name it something like
Outside In.
Like emotions on the inside, emotion inside. And they just take it and just that idea you're talking about, they just butcher it.
No, don't do it. Make good art.
Just kidding.
Please.
Just kidding. Like, I think that's a great question, honestly, Carlin. And I think there's a bad Christian take. I think there's a few bad Christian takes. Like, one would be that Christianity is a triumph of the head over the heart. Like, Jesus comes into your life and basically adopting a Stoic view, you say the emotions, the passions are evil, and Christianity is all about reining in your passions through just intellectual willpower. So just soak in that dry, dusty intellectual truth and then shove those emotions away, get them away from the console. Put some pure, rational, new person, your new self in Christ. The misreading would be, is just a rational person that doesn't deal with these bad emotions because these are all bad and corrupt. A bad take on the other side would probably over-spiritualize the Christian walk and be like, when I feel the sparkles, that is the Lord, versus saying, actually, also when I feel some danger, God gave me that. And when I feel, you know what I mean? Like you can easily convince emotions for spirituality. Yes. But I think a true Christian take says, first of all, there is a God. He speaks to us in all kinds of ways. I think you're dead right about the inner life mattering because Jesus says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And that was one of his biggest I want to say innovations, but it's not innovation. It is in a historical sense. But Jesus starts talking about the inner life, and the religious teachers around him had no concept. They had very little concept. He's like, don't be a whitewashed tomb. Don't be clean on the outside, but filthy on the inside. Out of the abundance of the heart.
What you put into your body doesn't defile it. What comes out of you is what could defile you.
What comes out.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. But it also emphasizes, okay, like the external world as well. The heavens declare the glory of God. It's not just an inner reality. We look out at truth, propositional truth, and we see it pointing us directly. Now, we're fallen. We don't see God face to face. But there are clues everywhere. reality itself is like an arrow pointing straight back to the existence of God. And so it's external and internal. And so where I think Christians could go wrong is thinking it's just about what I feel about it. And that's not true. Your emotions could be completely out of whack, and you don't feel a thing, but God is still real. It's all still true. And so I think a healthy Christian view of feelings is exactly what you said with the dog analogy. Dogs are useful companions. They're created to do certain things, but you can't let the dog lead you around, right? Emotions are very useful servants, but terrible masters. And I think Inside Out 2 is basically making that point. You can't let any emotion master you. Your sense of self needs to be something different than that. Now, I'll just stop. There's a lot of talking, but like, where does that sense of self come from? That's the question that I thought Inside Out was a little muddy on. They had an answer that I think was good, like developmentally, it sort of arises. Like children have no real sense of self when they're so little. It's so formative, right? And we're designed to, but I just think you land the plane of what's your sense of self by asking life's big questions. Is this all created on purpose? Did I create these emotions? Or are these emotions the end all be all? Or are they a part of this beautiful vehicle that God has given me to navigate life? So how do you portray that in a Pixar movie? I have no idea. But I just think even recognizing that this is not an accident, that there's someone who designed this console for us. And they designed a sense of anxiety when things are out of control, when I'm being a lazy butt and I need to work. And they designed actually joy to feel like just the happiness and delight in life. And they design sadness as the appropriate response when things go wrong. To just know that that this didn't just spontaneously generate, that someone designed all this complicated machinery and equipment and order and organization is there on purpose. Inside Out totally assumes that that's true. But they don't, and I don't think there's any fault in them for this. It's just outside of their purview. But they don't really ground it in like, this is here for a reason. And when you as a Christian realize like God gave you all the spectrum of emotions for a reason, and you feel things for reasons because it's part of the imago Dei in you, right? You're a very well-designed being. It lets you relax, sort of let anxiety take the console when it's appropriate, let joy take the console when it's appropriate, like let boredom, but not make those things the true source of your identity. So good. It does what Inside Out's trying to do, basically.
Totally. No, I loved that you pointed out the distinction that Riley's sense of self, the good one, is based on observation of reality. And I think that's the connection point to real life. Like our sense of self does come from, like all our memories, which are interpretations of the facts. But when you introduce the truth that you are designed by a creator, and if, say, in an alternate fan fiction world where Riley becomes a Christian, she learns deep in her heart that she was created by God. Okay, that could be part of her new sense of self. I'm created by God. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. That becomes one of the voices that keeps repeating in her head, and she can return to it when she feels anxious or when she feels belittled or whatever else she feels. She can return to that truth.
That is the truest thing about her.
Yes, if she was a Christian, yes, it would be, and that could be like could be like a really thick strand in her sense of personality, in her sense of self. But I think furthermore, and what this movie does do a great job of, and it's the very last line when Joy says, "Our girl is messy, but we love her anyway." Every part of her. Riley is messy, and she doesn't want to admit that at first because she's, ejecting all the bad memories. But the truth is, Riley makes mistakes. Right. Riley, and the term for this in Christianity is Riley has a sin nature. Riley has selfishness because she's born into selfishness, because we all are, because everyone is born into a fallen world. And so how do we reconcile our selfishness and are the parts of us that are ugly and hurtful and that just want to get ahead and put other people down and that are going to betray our conscience and sneak in and look at the book when we know we're not supposed to have that information. How do we reconcile all those things with, I want to be a good person? How do we synthesize, I'm someone who makes mistakes? And I think the best answer that this movie gives us is like, people are messy, people are human. But Christianity actually takes those flaws a little bit more seriously. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it takes them seriously and it's appropriate with the level of, like, there's room in it. It's not all like, you've sinned, you know. The fact is we have all done things deliberately that we knew were wrong. So that's true. But it also leaves room for that, the messiness in the process. Like, I think just because God does, he's not dumb. He understands, like in Proverbs it says, as a father has compassion on his children, so God has compassion on his children because he remembers that we're dust. He's not like, oh, you did what? You cheated your friends to be good on the hockey team? Like, he knew we were going to do that from the beginning of time, you know? And he's not like shocked, and he's not shocked. Whatever else he is, he's not shocked. And I think that's right, Carl. That's why that sense of self, I'm just thinking of a philosophy of even parenting. I'm going to just take a detour, but I think it'll lead us back where we're trying to go.
For it.
As a new parent with a 5-month-old baby, I mean, he is so pure right now. But the best parents, the parents I admire the most, come at parenting with this like kind of street smart, like, yeah, they're covetous little sinners, aren't they? You know, like when he becomes a toddler and just snatches that juice box out of your hand and, you know, and like, oh, look, he's being friends with the little, and he just like, he like hits them or like takes something from them. Like the parents I admire the most are not like, oh, you know, they're like, yep, that's human nature, buddy. We don't do that, you know, and they love their kids so much, but they're not shocked either. They're like anticipating it. They're ready for it. There's another style of parenting that I would just say is a lot more brittle, a lot more shockable, which assumes that human beings are inherently pure and good and society is what messes us up. And those parents are not only shocked and dismayed and completely unprepared for when their kids do bad things, but then because their worldview tells them that it's society's fault, their only recourse is to blame society, look around for little triggers that could be triggering their kid to behave selfishly, or blame themselves. And this is where some of the excesses of, now I think gentle parenting is a good thing. It brings a lot of good to parenting, but there's an excess of that particular gentle parenting philosophy, which is like, it must be my fault. Little Billy, oh, I know that when I told you not to hit that girl, that it made you mad, and that's my fault. No, you know, like the best parents are like, Billy, I know you want to hit because I know you want the juice box, but we don't hit people. Sorry, Susie's a person too, and you shouldn't hit her. And so you're going to sit on timeout, okay? And I love you, I'll always love you, but that behavior is not okay. And then that kid learns over time, my parent loves me. They're not shocked by me. And when I do something wrong, the thing I need to do is go say, I'm sorry. And the best homes are ones where I'm sorry comes easily and quickly. And there's responsibility taken. Totally. Right? And so just to sum that up, I think a Christian view of the self is not one that says, I'm a good person. And that's the cornerstone. It actually is like, I'm kind of a bad person often, but I'm very, very loved by God. And that's who I am. And so in my flesh, I'm going to get cranky. I'm going to get tired. I'm going to get worried about how I'm coming across and do the wrong thing and run into my teammate and hurt them. And the best thing I can do is realize they're an image bearer too. What I did was wrong and selfish. And start there. I'm so sorry. Can you forgive me? And in a world where everyone is a Christian, I think that what you'd hope to see, and it doesn't always work this way in church. Like if you've ever been in church, we're struggling to create that culture, you know, but the healthiest Christians are like not put out and offended constantly. You did what? You know, by the sin nature of their friends, neighbors, family. They have like a streetwise, like, yeah, no, I do that too. I totally forgive you. Are you kidding me? Yes. Yes. And it becomes easy and natural and grace-filled. Ironically, you start there by having a more pessimistic view of human nature.
I came across this quote by Martin Lloyd-Jones, I'll read it to you. You will never make yourself feel that you are a sinner because there's a mechanism in you as a result of sin that will always be defending you against every accusation. We are all on very good terms with ourselves, and we can always put up a good case for ourselves. Part of the sin nature is that we don't want to admit when we're wrong. But the only thing necessary to be forgiven is to admit that we're wrong, to turn and repent for our wrongdoings. And then forgiveness is instant and immediate and right there. Like the Lord is like so ready to forgive you, but he will oppose the proud, but he will adorn the humble with salvation.
Yeah.
Like he gets angry at the Pharisees who feel like they're better than everyone and because they're so religious, but he's drawn to the tax collectors and the prostitutes and the people that know that they're no good. They know that they're sinners. So when you're close to your sin and you're like able to kind of despair of your own goodness, the Lord, like, he's so drawn to that because he loves to forgive you. He loves to forgive you, but he can't forgive you if you're not repentant.
Yeah. That's so real. And you know what? There could be a nightmare version of Riley that's created, like Riley in 20 years, where she actually maintains intact that I'm a good person sense of self, but wraps it around unknowingly with all this prickly, anxious, like, I am a good person. That was your fault. You ran into me. When the truth is completely opposite, right? That's a nightmare version.
She can never admit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, again, this is gripes because this movie was great. And they're doing their best. But one part that I was like, ooh, warning, I got a little warning sign. Like when she's sitting there having a panic attack. Now, are panic attacks real? Absolutely. Is anxiety always a moral choice? Almost never. You know, like, no, it feels like something that happens to us. So I want to validate
and
that.
Sometimes it's physiological also.
Oh, yes, it is physiological, right?
Yeah.
God cares about our bodies too.
Yeah.
But when she's sitting there feeling those things and her attention is so turned inward, I could worry that maybe an implicit assumption would be she's off the hook for... Now, I know the movie doesn't actually say this, and I think they're actually pretty good and responsible. Like, they totally have that catharsis moment. But they maybe weight it a little more on the side of, she's not really responsible. She's the poor girl's having a panic attack. And while that might be true, it kind of ignores her bloody and broken friend who got clocked and is laying on the ice, you know, like 50 yards away. I think the most healthy version, again, it's a Pixar movie, so I'm reading too much into it. I'm just like heading off an implicit idea that I see rampant in culture where we ignore the person that we've wounded and we're so good at navel gazing, right, that we actually think the solution's going to start when I feel okay again, then I'll go say sorry.
Right.
And I actually think reality is different than that.
Yeah, panic attacks aside, because I know that is it's a big thing. But I hear what you're saying.
No, totally. Well, no, you're so right. Panic attacks, I mean, it's real. It is real. So there is a sense in which you can't go say sorry if you're like in the middle of that.
Your body is like attacking you, you know?
But this is why it matters to me, though, because we have a generation that gets lost in anxiety and panic. And the only thing we think we have is to look inward more. Well, psychology has long had this term called rumination, where actually if I'm only looking inward and only trying to figure out what's wrong with me and fix me and me and me and me, there's a sense in which I can really soup up that anxiety response worse than I otherwise would have.
Yes.
Whereas, and again, I'm not saying I think the movie could imply this. Whereas if I look outside of myself for a second and realize, oof, I know I'm feeling a certain kind of way, but I really hurt this person. And I'm not going to go apologize to try to like smooth it over so that I look okay, right? Because we can do that. But if I really let embarrassment take the control and say, oof, yeah, when I did this, it really hurt this person. And what I'm feeling right now is sorry for them because of my actions.
Which is actually sadness.
Sadness, right. It's a key, and embarrassment is a key to get us outside of ourselves for a second and actually soothe the anxious feelings that we feel. Because anxiety is among other things, an overemphasis on self and my own preservation.
Yeah, preach it.
The only reason I'm bringing this up is not to diminish panic attacks, actually to help us realize like we're missing actually some of the whole way that we're meant to be human, which is that we live in a world with others. And sometimes focusing on others is the key to unlock what we're feeling. But we miss it because we only focus on our sense of self and trying to engineer our sense of self first. And then if we feel okay in the long run, then we can focus on others. And actually a Christian worldview, again, because it starts with like, yeah, you're broken and like other people are real too. It actually can break us out of that, or not break us out, ease us out of that with the appropriate feelings of remorse at times. That's all I'm trying to say.
Can I say, to put your own feelings aside and to focus for a second on someone else is actually supernatural. That is so God's response. He's the ultimate one to put himself aside for the sake of others. He literally died for our sakes.
Yeah.
But the reason we're able to do that, the reason Christians are commanded to do that, is we're also empowered to do that by God's Spirit working in us. And the passage that's coming to mind, that it's actually been on my mind because last night I went to bed super anxious and my brain, I wasn't having a panic attack. I'm so thankful to have never actually had a panic attack, but my mind was racing and my heart was racing and I couldn't calm my body down and my brain, and I was fixating on this one thing. But the passage that came to mind is from Philippians 4. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Jesus Christ. That's like such a salve to an anxious heart. What is the comfort? That you can make your requests known to the Lord. The Lord is at hand. And the peace that surpasses understanding will be granted to you to guard your hearts and your minds in Jesus Christ. Like, you can put yourself aside, not because you're so selfless and you don't matter, but because the Lord will take your heart. The Lord will look after you. So you're freed up to go help out your neighbor who you hurt.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And to your earlier point about Christianity's emphasis on the heart, I don't want to lose that, because there's unlimited time where if we take scripture seriously, God just wants to hear from you. Like, the point of prayer is to align, it's to ask him things because he's a person, but it's also to just spend time with him and align your heart to his. And if you picture God like, I really want to see you, I really want to spend the time with you. Like, he's not like, you haven't prayed recently, have you? Like, I think we're worried that he's that way. He's not. He knows we're dust. He knows you're addicted to your phone, or I am, and and it's not out of like some punitive side that he's waiting to meet with us. He really likes us, you know? Like I saw my baby today, and my baby he's so joyful. He had this big gummy grin on his face to see me. He saw his dad and he was like, ah! Like, he was so happy. Aww. And I was so happy to see him. You know what I mean? And just to think like that's the primary analogy God has for
But what did
us.
he do to earn your love?
What has he done for me lately? Actually, like, it's so much deeper than that, because even when my son blows out his poopy diaper, I'm thrilled to see him. I might not love the poopy diaper sitch, but like, I don't really care at the end of the day. I just delight in caring for him. He brings nothing to the table that I need. But I love seeing him. I just love it. And if you could take God's words seriously when he says, I'm like a father to you, when you've thrown up all over yourself, I'm not like any less excited to see you. I love taking care of you. So why would we stay away from him? That's our real self. That's our truest self, is to be found in relationship with him, and the catharsis for our emotions. So Christianity validates and respects emotions, and is actually the goal. I was going to say this, it's not head versus heart, it's redeemed minds and redeemed hearts versus the old way, the sinful way.
The old heart and the old mind and the old will.
Yeah.
Wow. And so to be a teenage girl is really complicated, but to do it with the Lord, he's like this tender helper, and he can give you supernatural power to love your friends and forgive them. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. Come on.
Man.
Inside Out 2, Carl.
Inside Out 2. Who's your friend who likes to play bing bong, bing bong?
No, stop
His
it.
rocket makes you
Stop
shout,
it.
hooray, bing bong, bing bong. Wait, there's still some song power in that rocket. I needed that. Riley
Stop
and I
it.
were going to the moon.
Oh my gosh. You can't be just saying these bing bong
go
lines.
to the moon. Oh, it's so sad.
And even everything he says is like heartbreaking. Like, he's like, wait, Riley's so big now. She couldn't fit
And then
in the
she
rocket.
forgets him.
You're
Don't grow up.
Bing bong.
Growing up is so good. Growing up is
It is.
awesome.
Yep, it is. And introducing a new generation to the world, watching them grow up, that's pretty awesome too. You relive it
Yeah. All right. Hey,
all. I'll see you next time on
let's
Cinema
do it
Show.
again sometime, shall we?
Hey, let's do it again sometime.
Hey.
How about we do
How
it?
about it? All right.
right.
See you when.
You take care now.
Take care.
Yeah, all right.
Take care.